Ladies and gentlemen, RosterWatch Nation, welcome back to the epic RosterWatch podcast brought to you by RosterWatch.com. My name is Alex Dunlap here with Byron Lambert, live streaming episode 217 of the podcast. As we're getting ready, I should ask you before we started, Byron, I guess we got our credentials in and everything ready for the NFL Combine. I saw you forward me the hotel link last night. What day do we get in? Because I need to get my flight. Okay. So the meetings with the coaches and the GMs and stuff start early Tuesday morning. Is that the deal?
Yes.
And then we have that just for one day. So that's going to be a big day. Make sure if you're watching us on YouTube, Periscope, Twitch, any of these, Facebook, make sure you're subscribed to the podcast, the RosterWatch podcast, and Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, wherever it is that you listen, you can find it there. And we'll have a bunch of awesome content from there at the Combine. Always super excited about that event. Not only to meet the prospects and break down their athletic testing, but also just we get access to all 32 coaches and GMs, minus Bill Belichick, who certainly will not be talking this year, I wouldn't think. but maybe it's like, who knows? Belichick always does shit that surprises you. Like the one year where you say there's no way he comes out this year to answer all these Brady questions, just the year he shows up first,
Belichick never talks, and the Cowboys general manager never speaks either.
Yeah, that's definitely true. But he does. He does speak. He just does it in the big Cowboys bus outside, and only for a few select reporters. Right. We got we have a bunch of work to do on the best ball cheat sheet. Generally, the Combine is the time that we like to have that up and going. There have only been the best ball 10s just really got kicked off. As I was mentioning to Byron last week, I'm just now wrapping up in best ball 10 I've just finished best ball 10 number 3, and I'm finishing up now with best ball 10 number 4. So those things are off the ground at least a little bit, but the ADPs really aren't good yet. We're trying to combine those with the FFPC ADPs to kind of figure out how we're going to gain some leverage here to start. Byron, you had some running back takes you wanted to get to again today, and also some news and notes. I saw that Arthur Blank is starting to, why not just fire some people in charge of these bad fucking contracts that they've given out to guys like Devontae Freeman, instead of just acting like you're tilted about these contracts in the media?
Well, Alex, you're a former executive headhunter. Hiring sucks, man. Right? Hiring sucks. Sourcing personnel, that's tough, man. And so I guess a guy like Arthur Blank, man, he's just still looking for the path of least resistance. Seems like it's time for regime change in Atlanta, but suppose I can buy the argument. Maybe this group gets one more year here, and maybe last year was a bit of an anomaly. So much of it has to do with the quality.
Is anybody ever going to pay a running back ever again? What is Tennessee going to do? Derrick Henry's going to hold out, isn't he? He's going to have to hold out. No, people now, it's been the Gurley contract. It's been even the Zeke contract is now looking like it's going to swindle the Cowboys. They're not going to be able to pay Dak and Byron Jones and everybody that they need to keep after last year paying, Zeke and Jalen Smith and guys like this. Now when it's important players like Amari, Dak, Byron Jones, there's not enough money. Now they hate the Devontae Freeman deal. They hate the David Johnson deal. They'd love to trade it. Todd Gurley, they want to trade it. Zeke's making this thing Derrick Henry's not going to get his money. I don't think, not at least not right off the bat, and that worries me about him. I know we're not even talking. It's early to be doing a stream. We're not even talking about him.
It's a fascinating test, and it's not too early because I figured I'd save it for next week's podcast. Is one of the things we do in preparation for the NFL Combine is we start kind of consolidating in our mind what some of the major offseason narratives are across the NFL, and hopefully we can get into some of those pre-Combine, and certainly we'll get into them coming out of the Combine. Certainly that's where many of those narratives are born, at least in principle, to the mainstream. But what the signing of Derrick Henry, just from a pure personnel perspective, a salary cap perspective, is the dynamic of the league. I mean, that's a very interesting narrative this offseason. I mean, yeah, we'll see if running backs still get paid. He's the big test, but I mean, you're right, Alex. It doesn't really seem like the days of the Emmitt Smiths are long gone, man. You think back to the kind of career that guy had, and you realize that he was an absolute just freak and anomaly to be able to do that for 10 or 15 years. These other guys have one contract in them, a couple of 400 touch seasons in them, and they are toast. So, yeah, I mean, we got good backs.
You would tell me back then. Yeah, you would tell me that back then, and I didn't have the full appreciation I should have. It was still too soon in the mid 2000s or something like that when you were preaching this to me. And I still said, I don't think he's one of the, top 5 greatest running backs ever. And he'd call me a donkey. And it's just like now, looking back, it's like, the
volume that guy touched the ball with was it's true miracle.
There's been no one like him. So you were right.
So we'll get it with Derrick Henry. And look, the other guy is Melvin Gordon in free agency. He's probably not going to get what he wants either. So those are two certainly to watch. And like you said, Alex, we had a little bit of narrative trickle in over the last 24 hours about guys like James Conner and Devontae Freeman from their front offices. That made me start thinking about some of the other notable or marquee names kind of on the running back side of the best ball cheat sheet, on the running back side of best ball ADPs currently, kind of these mid-round running backs that are fairly big names, but you look at them and you wonder, what do we really make of these guys? So the narrative that came out.
Okay. I'm sorry. I was just going to ask you if you could, for anybody who might have missed those bits of news about Connor and Devontae Freeman, just what it was.
Sure. Yeah. So Arthur Blank basically coming out and saying that there's not an endless salary cap in Atlanta, and in regards to how he views Devontae Freeman's forecast with the team here. A lot of folks have been speculating Freeman probably gone this offseason. He's a former favorite of RosterWatch, but we just think that he's pretty much toast. He's lost all his juice, and he was a guy that didn't have exceptional juice to begin with in the NFL. So he's a guy that we're kind of, I think, is basically full stop on for me with Freeman. So the news coming in that, the Falcons, are probably cooled down on Freeman in terms of how he affects their salary cap. Not a real surprise. Certainly not a player that's deserving of any mid-round status. You would think even if he gets signed elsewhere, it's probably to be in some sort of committee. And
especially with the running back crop coming in this year, these guys are good, right? These guys are good. It makes you, just before you go on to Connor, just on Freeman, is there any value right now to be had in best ball drafts for any of these backups like Brian Hill or I saw Quadri Allison in that SiriusXM draft I was in the other night. Quadri Allison was drafted in like the 13th round. I think he's a slug and he sucks. If they get rid of Devontae Freeman, do you think that they believe the answer is in-house with getting Ito Smith back and maybe in some sort of committee with Brian Hill, Ito Smith, Quadri Allison, or do you think that they would definitely be in the market for maybe I don't think they would be in the market for an early round runner, of course, but maybe a mid-round runner out of this class. There's a lot of good ones.
I mean, I expect them to be in the market for running back, likely in the draft, especially if they're concerned about the salary cap. I suppose if you could get Ito Smith or Brian Hill at the very end of your draft, I could get in on one of those in best ball as just a flyer. In best ball, that's probably a decent pick, getting one of those guys, whoever you can get at the end, and not Quadri Allison. But I suppose if it could be Ito or potentially Brian Hill at the very end, and that makes a little bit of sense, And what we did see out of Devontae this year, in the case that he does go to another team, is he still has some PPR relevance. But even for that to happen, he had to be in the backfield for 65-70% of snaps, and that's a real concern, projecting him to get that kind of workload if he goes elsewhere in free agency and what's likely to be a committee. And then the other bit of narrative trickling out, as I mentioned, out of Pittsburgh, is GM Kevin Colbert of the Pittsburgh Steelers just came out and flat out called it how it was. Says James Conner, many people's darling heading into the season this last year, a disappointing season for running back James Conner in Pittsburgh. That's coming straight from the Steelers general manager, Kevin Colbert. So again, Alex, this kind of, when these narratives trickling in, it made me start to contemplate some of the other, notable and meaningful marquee names. Like I said, on the running back side of best ball ADPs, kind of in those mid rounds. And, when I saw this coming out about James Conner, I started digging a little bit into his production last year and what the forecast looks like for him. So James Conner, Kevin Colbert says it's a disappointing season. He was a guy who averaged 4.5 yards per carry in 2018. That dipped to 4 yards a carry flat in 2019. We do have James Conner going into the final year of a cheap rookie deal. So in some regards, maybe we could expect the Steelers to just run his wheels off this next season. Now, on the other hand, we do have Benny Snell, who was a rookie last year, who was added to the mix with Jalen Samuels, two good backup running backs. And, I think that when you have Snell and Samuels, the handcuff situation, the backup situation devolves a little bit into a cannibalistic scenario, because both those guys can play. Both of them have some 3-down capability there. Now, James Conner, he's averaged less than 12 games played per season so far in his career.
Was it 10 last year? It was 9 or 10, right? It was 10.
I think it was 10 last year.
Yeah, 10. So he played 10 last year. He averaged, in the games he played, he averaged 14.8 PPR points per game, which is basically, that's basically like what you got out of Le'Veon Bell last year. And I think people would consider what Le'Veon Bell did to be a disappointment last season, right? It's about like Le'Veon Bell or Gurley, and neither of those guys were guys you'd love to have on your fantasy teams last year.
Sure. And I mean, it was only 15 touches a game last season for James Conner. Now, maybe that was because of the injury, but again, we have the injuries and the durability, but again, we have a burgeoning backfield behind him. So 15 touches a game last season is not going to get it done for a player like Conner, especially since he was coming off a 20 touch per game season in 2018, where he got massive volume. That's what we were all hoping for, again, because he's a 3-down capable back. James Conner only had 20 touches twice in 2019. Again, he obviously wasn't fully healthy, but the team has 3 solid backs now. And I think with Benny Snell going into year 2, he is going to deserve a little bit more time this next season. Where James Conner still shines, though, Alex, he's still quite impressive in the receiving category. When he did play this last season, he was good for 3 to 5 receptions per game, which is a real boon in PPR. So, a lot of the outlook for James Conner, I believe, will also have to do with how we forecast the quality of the Steelers' offensive line and their offense in general. We're hearing that Big Ben is looking good for a return, which would obviously be tremendous for anybody.
Yeah,
on the
they're saying he's still a month off from throwing a tennis ball, was last I heard. But I mean, they're certainly expecting him back. Big Ben's never really been that healthy, and he's as old as all these guys that are falling off the cliff, right? Is he as old as Eli and Rivers?
Yeah, it's all the same draft class. Aaron Rodgers not too far behind him.
I think Ben probably treats his body a lot shittier than those guys too, just by all the motorcycle stuff, and I'll bet you he eats worse food.
The other good thing about the Steelers running back situation is they have a formidable defense. So even if that offense isn't high octane, maybe as we've seen it in the past, the Steelers can maintain a game script with the play of their defense that will, support the running backs. But I guess just, the question is, James Conner is a big name. He's a guy you still have to, he's garnering a mid-round ADP. I mean, I look at this and I start to think, man, this whole group of guys, I feel a lot more comfortable round 5. James Conner you got to draft him as an RB2. I think there's a lot of reason to believe he can be an RB2, but you sure as hell would like to draft him as an RB3. It's just it doesn't seem like that's what the circumstances will provide currently based on ADPs with James Conner, Alex.
So in the SiriusXM, people watching on YouTube can just see I've pulled up a screen share here that doesn't really add much to if you're listening on the podcast, it doesn't really add much because I'll be explaining sort of what I'm looking at. But So if I just look at where I had priced in just based on initial early ADPs that are bad ADPs, but we got to start somewhere. James Conner, somewhere between I initially priced him in somewhere between in a 12-team league and a half-point PPR between pick 39 and 42. So 4.3 to 4.06. And as you'll see here, when I did the SiriusXM Experts draft the other day, he was the guy who fell out of this range. Le'Veon Bell didn't fall out of where I figured he would go. Neither did Chris Carson, Mark Ingram, Marlon Mack, or even the rookie DeAndre Swift. But both James Conner and Kerryon Johnson out of this tier both fell a little bit farther than I would have imagined. Kareem Hunt was also in this tier. That he fell to the fifth round, not quite as far. He fell to the fifth round. Jeff Ratcliffe actually took Kareem Hunt, which I thought was pretty sharp of him. So do you think that whenever you look at the ADP for James Conner, do you believe that he belongs more in this sort of – these guys went a lot earlier, the Darius Geises, the Raheem Mosterts, the Damian Williams, who I've already decided needs to kind of come up a little bit. Does James Conner belong more in that sort of tier, do you believe?
I do believe so, but it does sound like the experts, the way they're drafting, it's not necessarily in accord with the current ADPs, but at least it feels like the industry is starting to get this right, that some of these players like Conner may be a tad bit overvalued versus that other group of players that you said the experts were kind of drafting ahead of ADP, the Geises, maybe the Damian Williams, certainly all guys I wanted to talk about in this podcast today. Okay,
great. Well, just before we get off of Conner, do you feel like it's because Benny Snell only 4 targets last year? I mean, you said that, Conner was good. I believe Conner caught a good amount. Did he catch like 36 balls?
Option.
Yeah, in 10 games. So, I mean, that guy has a pretty good receiving floor to him. But the problem is it's not just Benny Snell that's there. There's also Jalen Samuels, whose calling card is catching footballs out of the backfield. It's like you'd say, what does Jalen Samuels do well? Well, he catches footballs out of the backfield really well and is a good – to me, the way that I see it, when I look at this whole thing, it's like if you take Benny Snell and Jalen Samuels and you put them together, it's like that gives you a guy like Conner, right? You take the between the tackles, good player that Benny Snell is. You take the good receiver that Jalen Samuels is. You put those two guys together, it feels kind of like Conner. So the fact that Colbert said that, look, he's still a starting running back in the league and all this stuff like that, it makes me think he's still going to get first crack at this and maybe first crack at 3-down work. Do you think that the new normal is just a 3-way committee here, though? Like, is that what we're –
maybe something like we saw in Baltimore a little bit this last year. I mean, difficult to make a case that James Conner is in line for any more than 15 to 18 touches if you want to try to be rational about your projections and where he's slotted. I mean, that's a fair number to go off of. I mean, you hoping for the 20 touches. It didn't happen last year. Now the backfield's more crowded. I suppose that's a best case scenario. I don't think it's what you can plan on. Certainly he's a volume guy. The team's got to want to get him the ball more than 15 times a game if he's healthy. But I mean, you got to use that as the floor because that's what we saw this last year. So I would slot James Conner 15 to 18 touch guy who's getting, he gets his 3-4 receptions a game when he's healthy. So that's solid for PPR. And, to me, that makes him probably a low end RB2 when it's all, said and done.
Okay. I mean, that makes sense. And the question is when you're going to get your wide receiver to, if you want to get into this Stephon Diggs, Devontae Parker, DK Metcalf sort of area, I have a feeling we're going to be talking more like James Conner versus a good back end running back 2 versus a good back end wide receiver 2 in that spot. So the particular areas that I have a small bit offset on the cheat sheet right now for my initial value proposition might need to be sort of consolidated a little bit there, I think, with the exception of a few of those guys at the very top who were going about exactly where I had them priced in. Who else do you want to talk about besides Conner?
Well, the good news is a little downward pressure on Conner's ADP. All of a sudden, he could become
a value. Yeah, if we're talking fifth round, if we're talking 5th round, I think that's too late, right? I mean, it's too late. I'd have priced in at the 4, or like I said, 4.03 to 4.06. Hey, he had no takers there, so just
Alex, you brought up a handful of the other guys that were, I guess, popular in your SiriusXM mock draft, and so let's. One of those that you mentioned is a little bit polarizing right now when you get to that area of the draft. On the running back side of best ball ADPs and the best ball cheat sheet at rosterwatch.com is Detroit Lions running back Kerryon Johnson, a player who averaged 5.4 yards per carry as a rookie. He plummeted down to 3.6 yards per carry last year in his sophomore season. Kerryon heading into the 3rd year of a 4-year rookie contract. We did see Bo Scarborough emerge a little bit as the hammer down the stretch last year for the Lions, as Kerryon was attempting to come back from really a significant knee injury. But other than Scarborough, unless you're still a Ty Johnson truther, there's really nobody behind Kerryon on the Lions depth chart. Perhaps they could go in on day 2 or day 3 in the draft at the running back position. With Kerryon, real concern, only 18 games played in his first 2 seasons. He played 10 games as a rookie, only played 8 games in 2019, again hampered by what appeared to be a significant knee injury. He's a 15 touch per game so far in his career. That's Kerryon Johnson, running back Detroit Lions, which was the same in 2019 as it was in 2018. So how many times do we always say you got to read the writing on the wall? You got to take things for what they are. Read the tea leaves. We've always said the Lions want Kerryon to be a 15 to 18 touch per game guy. We've always said that's exactly how he views himself. And look, the Lions, it's the perspective the Lions espouse annually at the combine, is that he's not, they never want to give him the workhorse, moniker.
It's infuriating that you can ask and ask, is it time to give him more touches? Like, we're not sure. We want to just keep on wallowing around here as a shitty team. It's like, it's just,
and the thing with Kerryon that's enticing is his 3-down capability, but very, very concerning was, the bottom fell out on his reception total this last year. I mean, that's just in a guy that we're concerned about volume and durability. I mean, its 3-down capability is his main source of appeal. You cannot have his reception totals plummet like they did this last season. And we got to find out whether that is an omen or it's a harbinger for the future with Kerryon Johnson. He's a good player. He's a good receiver. He needs to be catching the ball if he's going to be a relevant fantasy back for us. So if you're bullish on Kerryon Johnson, Alex, I suppose you're probably hanging your hat on the fact that he had 49 touches in week 3 and week 4 last year. You're still calling for all the supposed upside that a Kerryon Johnson could entail, but that was before he got injured. I mean, he had a chance to keep that pace up before he got injured last year, and they didn't maintain that volume with him. So again, that's a sign we need to look out for. So I guess my take, Alex, as I started digging into this, is I thought that maybe I was going to be high on Kerryon Johnson coming into this offseason, at least versus maybe what my anticipated ADP might be. I mean, you got to remember, Kerryon Johnson was going 2nd, 3rd round by the time drafts were in full swing this last year. And, this analysis has kind of leveled me out a little bit on Kerryon. It is still important to remember they don't have anybody else really other than Scarborough and Ty Johnson behind him. But I think if you're going to be real with yourself, you have to, I think you come back to earth a little bit on your expectations with Kerryon. So, is he a solid pick at that juncture in your best ball draft? Sure, I think so. I'll probably have my share at his current ADP. I just feel like after I looked at it a little more in depth, maybe I'm not as high on Kerryon Johnson rebound coming into the offseason versus ADP as maybe I had anticipated just a month or 2 ago.
Well, in the ADP we're talking about, where he wasn't getting any takers, at least in the SiriusXM Experts draft, and where he's falling currently in the best ball leagues that I'm testing this thing in right now, they're just constantly pouring into my in my email inbox that I'm on the clock. Kerryon's falling past. I mean, I had him going in the 4th round just before the 4-5 turn. You're the pricing king. Do you think that's at least a good place to at least start and figure out where people's heads are at? Because from there, I mean, it feels like we're looking at a 5th round ADP right now in 12-team leagues.
I mean, to me, all these guys that we're about to talk about, in a perfect world, in an ideal situation, you would draft them as an RB3,
a flex
for their RB2 upside. So if you start counting it up, like 3 RBs in, let's say we're not going tight end or quarterback early in our draft, because that's that would be unusual for us. So let's just say you go skill positions. I mean, you're 3 running backs in, 2 or 3 receivers in. I mean, that's round 5, right? I mean, round 5 and beyond.
You don't want to take because you don't want to be taking. You might not want to be taking Kerryon as your running back 2 because it feels like running back 2 in the 12-team league is his upside, especially when full circle back to Devontae Freeman, especially when you hear all the rumors now that they were that the Falcons almost got a deal done with the Lions last year for Devontae Freeman. The Lions wanted Devontae Freeman last year. They're gonna fuck Kerryon and Kerryon Johnson owners at some point this offseason.
If you're going to draft coming. If you're going to draft a projected 15 to 18 touch guy as an RB2, he absolutely has to profile like Mark Ingram did last offseason with the Ravens. I mean, it's the only way that's really, really viable, right? And you don't have that sense of faith in a Kerryon Johnson. I'm not sure I have it in a James Conner either, Alex. Let me ask you about a few more of these guys here. And so I will make a quick note, though, as we move along here. This is kind of the juncture of best ball ADPs, Alex, where I noticed you began sliding in some of the rookie running back prospects. Obviously, we're going to know much more here in pretty short order after the combine and pro days, but maybe just some thoughts here about rookie running back ADBs kind of emerge. I mean, it's pretty typical, right? The premier running backs in recent years are round 4, round 5 guys, right?
That was my initial inkling that you take this is a really good running back class, and generally the stud running backs who go to the good situations are taken in round 4. Sometimes in round 3. I mean, Josh Jacobs last year got up to the 3rd round as far as his ADP. So if one of these guys lands in a Jonathan Taylor or something goes to the Bucks, we could be talking about him as like him or J.K. Dobbins. They go to the Bucks and with high draft capital, something like that. We could be talking about a dude that's more to like the 2-3 turn. But I think it's prudent to start considering these guys in best ball. This is what you get a good edge in best ball, getting these guys early before their landing spots, before people would know exactly who they are. And we saw in the draft, the experts draft, both Jonathan Taylor and J.K. Dobbins. DeAndre Swift didn't drop out of this area, but both Taylor and Dobbins dropped out of this same area that we're talking about here, right around the beginning of the 5th round. So I thought that represented good value there on those guys. What do you think about the rookies?
I mean, definitely at first thought, if there's a stud 3-down capable lead rookie back that's drafted to a good situation, I mean, even without knowing who that is right now, or maybe where he lands, you got to think that you're going to like that player more than a Kerryon Johnson.
It's good to take those shots on these good players, and we'll know more about how we have them stacked up, as Byron said, after we get our combine numbers, after we can put those into our models, and then after we get more film work done. We've done most of our film work thus far. If you've been following on wide receivers, we'll get into running backs as soon as we get the meat of this wide receiver class done and get through a lot of the really good juniors. But just watching college football and just being an observer of the sport, that Jonathan Taylor, J.K. Dobbins, these guys have the requisite size that you need. They have the 3-down capability at the next level. They're absolute athletic monsters and beasts. And there's a lot of teams with running back needs and a lot of teams that don't want to pay the bunch of money for these guys. So we saw last year. We see it every year, but I mean, just look at last year: Devin Singletary, Miles Sanders, Josh Jacobs, all those guys. Very, very, very valuable, at least sort of on the back end of your rosters that sort of moved up towards your true running back 2 and the studs that you could depend on towards the end of the season whenever they started getting the run that we anticipated that they would by year's end. And those are the kinds of players in best ball that you can more afford to have because there's not the opportunity cost of using a bench spot on them until they really start to fire up.
Well, that's a good segue, Alex. I mean, one of the rookie running backs from that very group that you didn't mention from last year, Alex, is Bears running back David Montgomery. For me, this is one of the huge narratives of the offseason. Probably one of the most pressing questions I have going into Indianapolis this year. Is David Montgomery going to get 300-plus touches this year or not? If not, I'm out. Yeah. Last year was 267 touches for David Montgomery. Look, he's not a 15 to 18 touch per game guy. So I'm not in on David Montgomery on anything less than a clear and bold endorsement of him as a lead running back for the Chicago Bears. As a player, I still like David Montgomery very, very much. He played all 16 games as a rookie. He's the durable guy that we thought he was coming out. He still has a lot of what I'm looking for in a young running back, but plain and simple, David Montgomery is a volume player, which isn't surprising. That's like so many other of the good running backs in the NFL. That's not unusual. As a matter of fact, it's probably more the rule than the exception that the good running backs need the volume. And you know, what's maddening about it, Alex, is David Montgomery's 3-down capability is the exact reason that Chicago drafted him last year. You know, less than 2 receptions per game, 15 to 18 touches per game. It's all unacceptable. And I don't care about Tariq Cohen, who the team won't make a commitment to either. So, you know, Chicago has to address the offensive line this offseason post Kyle Long. 3.7 yards per carry for David Montgomery as a rookie. There's a lot of our counterparts out there in the industry that'll probably crow about that's right in line with their evaluation, his lack of explosiveness coming out as a rookie. And perhaps those guys will be right. I still think that 3.7 yards per carry for David Montgomery last year was probably much more related to the offensive line, the play of the offensive line in Chicago, as well as just the overall lack of volume. I mean, he's just like so many of these other guys that his yards per carry increases with volume. So, I mean, I'm just going to hammer Matt Nagy right off the bat. I mean, is David Montgomery a 300 touch guy? I mean, is that what he has to get? Is he going to get 300 touches this year? Because that's the type of player he is. They're undermining the entire reason they even drafted him, which is maddening if they don't use him like that. And that Bears offense, I just can't, until we have clarity there, I really can't get in on anybody, so that's a huge question. I don't expect to get that commitment from Nagy. If somehow we find out that he is a 20 touch per game guy, I'm going to be back in the David Montgomery business. But outside of a clear and definitive statement by the team there, Alex, I think we got to proceed with apprehension, especially the ADP is not really all that low currently on David Montgomery.
I think that's a good way to end the pod. I don't know if there's any more guys you want to talk about. We could end it like that, or we could keep going. Could always edit this part out.
I have more, but we can just end it, man.
I mean, what do you think? Okay, yeah, I think we can just end it like that. That was a good, strong end. Alan Seslowski's in here saying that the rookie running back's going sooner than last year. I don't know. I feel like I'm not sure. But we'll definitely keep an eye on it for you guys. Again, you can find the pod at anywhere you listen to these podcasts. If you're watching on Facebook, YouTube, Periscope, Twitch, we certainly appreciate it, guys. We love y'all, and we will be talking to you soon enough. Peace.